In the Halo universe, humans compared to many of the alien races can seem physically inferior in many ways, especially when compared to the stronger races like brutes or elites, which have an average height of anywhere from roughly 7 to 9 feet tall. Pair this with the even more extreme weight gap, with some sources quoting brutes as being up to 1,500 pounds on the high end. That means that a brute chieftain can be the equivalent of 5 to 7 large men. This can make humans seem meager in comparison. In order to combat this, humanity began working on a race of super soldiers handpicked from the genetic elite of our species to create Spartans, the most important of them being Master Chief John 117. Today, we are going to be analyzing some of the physical feats that Master Chief has performed and comparing him to some real-life athletes in order to get a better idea of just how strong John really is. So let's start with the baseline measures. Master Chief out of power armor is roughly 6 foot 10 inches tall and weighs in at roughly 300 pounds. While most of the feats we'll be looking at are without power armor, it's important to note that if we were to do a natty or not on John, he is definitely in the not category. Spartans undergo extensive biological enhancements ranging from chemical injections to invasive whole-body surgery, many of whom do not even survive this procedure, so Chief will be competing in the untested federations for sure, anti-doping agencies be damned. Starting with the first example, this excerpt from Halo: The Fall of Reach quotes Chief as doing dumbbell curls with 20 kilos, or roughly 45 pounds, and saying they were too light. He then switches to 40 kilos, or roughly 90 pounds, and settles on that weight. Keep in mind these are dumbbells, so altogether John is curling 180 pounds. The book also states that Chief was training every day, so to assume that this is anywhere near a max effort for him wouldn't be right. Realistically, we can assume he's doing a set of anywhere from 8 to 12 reps for multiple sets, and is most likely training at an intensity of roughly 80%. So given that 20% of 180 is 36, we can conservatively estimate that his 10 rep max is 216 pounds. Now if we extrapolate that to a 1 repetition maximum, using the National Academy of Sports Medicine's calculations, we can see that John's curl max is about 288 pounds. For comparison, the current curl world record is held by Leroy Walker at 250 pounds, placing Chief comfortably ahead of him. Keep in mind, Leroy Walker is almost 80 pounds heavier than John. Later in the same scene, Chief gets into an altercation with a group of 4 ODSTs that start training in the gym. During their fight, he breaks several of their bones, most notably with this example. John snapped a sidekick toward the second man, caught him in the groin, crushing the soft organs and breaking the target's pelvis. Ouch. Chief being able to 1v4 highly trained ODSTs completely unharmed aside, breaking bones with 1 strike is practically unheard of. Most sources online say that it takes about 4,000 newtons of force to break the typical human femur, with Discovery.com quoting that, ounce for ounce, bone is stronger than steel. So if we convert newtons to pounds of force, we find that it would take 800 pounds of force to break an average human femur. However, these are not typical humans, but trained ODSTs. These guys are the equivalent of Navy SEALs who jump to a planet from orbit with little more than a glorified refrigerator with helicopter blades for protection. So obviously, these are strong, trained men, and we know that strength training can increase bone density up to 8%. If we also take into consideration that the average human pelvis is 4.3 times wider than a femur, we can calculate that Chief had to generate at minimum 18,576 newtons of force for this kick, or 4,176.05 pounds of force. So one-shotting enemies with melee isn't just a game mechanic, Chief can actually do that in the lore. The strongest comparison I was able to find was this Taekwondo specialist's kick. He clocked in with a kick power of 2,300 pounds of force, barely over half of what Chief was able to do at minimum. Keep in mind, the Taekwondo specialist was in the perfect scenario to execute his kick, a controlled environment against the heavy bag. Chief performed this mid-combat and after a strenuous weightlifting workout. If Chief was fresh and in a controlled environment as well, he could probably generate anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of force in one kick, but that's more speculation. If all this wasn't impressive enough, these are stats for Chief when he was a teenager and before he was fully grown. That's right, Chief is a kid when all this happens. No wonder he can flip warthogs with ease when he grows up. Speaking of which, I also did the math for this too. Your standard M12 FAV Warthog weighs in at 3 metric tons or 3,000 kilos, equating to 6,614 pounds. And that's the version without the minigun on the back. Even that looks flimsy in comparison if we take the Scorpion tank's weight of 66 metric tons or 145,505 pounds, which Chief also flips relatively easily. So yeah, Chief is kinda strong. Given this is in power armor, but it's still fun to think about. In armor, Chief can run up to about 65 miles per hour, which is wild to think that you could see him jogging next to you on the highway as you drive to Burger King. I doubt they'd even turn him away at the drive-thru because he's basically a car when he's in armor. Yeah, could I get a Whopper? Hold the mayo, please. Extra large fries. Do Whoppers even come with mayo? Out of armor, it's hard to get an exact measure, but the average estimate is around 30 miles per hour for his run speed. In the 2009 World Championship, Usain Bolt took the world record speed for fastest man alive at a top speed of 27.78 miles per hour in the 100-meter sprint. Even with the conservative estimates, this once again puts Chief ahead when compared to the best humanity has to offer today. So with this information, we can assume Chief's suit allows him to propel himself at roughly 2 times speed, so we can use this number to determine his vertical jump height. If we look at this section from Halo Evolutions, John sent 4 more rounds ripping into the darkness before jumping 3 meters up to the top of the spillway. 3 meters converts to around 10 feet, and given that Mjolnir armor roughly doubles his speed and vertical jump is heavily based on how quickly you can throw your weight upwards, it's safe to assume that out of armor, Chief can jump at least 5 feet in the air, which actually seems to not be the best. Surprisingly, this footage shows Evan Younger jumping 5.3 inches, just edging out Chief in maybe the only thing that he can be beaten in. And while Evan barely made it and Chief did this jump in a combat scenario, the number is still higher. Now, given we're comparing Chief to highly specialized super athletes who focus all of their training at becoming good at one thing, and Chief easily outclasses most of them by significant margins. If Chief were to specialize in a single discipline besides war, it's interesting to speculate what kind of feats he would be able to pull off. So that's how strong Master Chief really is. Do you think these numbers are accurate, or do you think I'm full of myself and need to go back to math class? Probably both. Be sure to let me know in the comments. I had a ton of fun making this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.